There's a number sitting in a report from the National Institute on Retirement Security that should be illegal to print without a warning label. The median retirement savings for a typical Gen X household is $40,000. Not 400, 40. That's the middle of the pack. Half the households are below it. I'm Frank, and the reason I want to talk to you today isn't to scare you about that number. It's to explain why it happened, because once you see the setup, you stop feeling stupid about the result. Here's the part that flips it. You weren't careless. You were the test subject. Goldman Sachs has a name for your cohort now. Chris Cedar, one of their senior strategists, calls Gen X the 401k experiment generation. That's a quote in print from the firm that manages the money. You were the first group in American history asked to fund your own retirement out of your own paycheck in a market account you picked yourself with no pension behind you and no roadmap in front of you. The generation above you got a pension and a gold watch. The generation below you watched what happened to you and at least knew the game had changed. You got handed a brochure in 1994 and a phone number for a guy named Doug in HR. And then you got called a slacker for being skeptical about it. So let's talk about the psychology of the fool. Because the word fool is doing a lot of work here, and it isn't what you think. The fool, in the old sense, the court jester, the tarot card, the guy at the edge of the cliff, is not stupid. The fool is the one who sees through everything and still walks into the trap, because the trap was the only road available. The fool is the smart skeptic who got handed the bill anyway. That's the version of you we're looking at. Not naive, not lazy. Cynical as a defense mechanism, accurate about almost every institution you side-eyed, and still somehow short 400 grand on retirement. Let me give you the number for that too, because it's specific. Schroders ran their 2025 U.S. retirement survey on Gen Xers between 45 and 60. They asked what people expect to have saved by retirement and what they think they'll actually need. The gap came in at $404,976. That's the largest shortfall of any generation in the survey, bigger than millennials, bigger than boomers. And only 16% of Gen Xers in that survey said they feel like they've saved enough. 16. So you've got a generation that was measurably more skeptical of institutions than the one before it, and we'll get to that study in a second. And that same skepticism didn't protect them from the one institutional shift that mattered most. Why? That's the fool's problem. Cynicism is armor against being lied to. It is not armor against compound interest math. Let's pull the lens back. There's a researcher named Jean Twenge at San Diego State who spent years tracking trust data across generations. Her work shows institutional trust in government, in media, in big companies, in the systems that run your life, dropped from about 33% among boomers down to about 18% by the time Gen X was coming up. That number is a measured collapse, not a mood. You were, by the numbers, the most institutionally skeptical kids in the room. There's a whole academic book on this from 2021, Melissa Vosen-Callan's Ode to Gen X, Institutional Cynicism in Stranger Things and 1980s Film. Her argument is that the defining psychological trait of your cohort is institutional cynicism paired with this stubborn instinct to rebuild things privately, in the family, in the friend group, in the basement. Don't trust the system. Build a smaller one you can see. Okay, so you're skeptical, you're independent, you're rebuilding small. Good instincts in a lot of ways. But here is where the fool gets caught. The one institution you couldn't side-eye your way out of was the one that quietly switched out under your feet. Pensions, where they existed, were a deal between your employer and your future. You didn't have to believe in them. You didn't have to manage them. They just ran in the background like a utility. Then, somewhere in the mid-80s and through the 90s, that utility got shut off for most private sector workers and replaced with a self-serve kiosk called the 401k. The 401k was never designed to replace pensions. It started as a tax wrinkle for executives. It got drafted into duty. And nobody walked you through what that switch actually meant. You got an enrollment packet. You picked between 3 mutual funds with names that sounded like law firms. You set a contribution percentage based on a guess. If you were lucky, somebody mentioned the company match. If you weren't, you found out about it 5 years later from a coworker. The Goldman Sachs framing, experiment generation, is the right word. You were the A/B test. Nobody knew how this would land for a full working life because nobody had run it for a full working life. They're finding out now by looking at your bank balance. Allianz Life did a study in 2025. 81% of Gen X said they're worried about affording the retirement they want. 81. Higher than Gen Z, higher than millennials. And, this is the part that gets me, higher than boomers. The generation closest to actually retiring is more worried than the generation already inside it. That's the experiment showing up on the readout. Now you might be sitting there going, all right, Frank, fine. The setup was rigged, but other people figured it out. Why didn't I? A few reasons, and none of them are character flaws. 1. You were the first ones in. There was no older sibling. There was no parent who'd done this and could say, here's what I wish I'd known. Your parents had a pension, or they didn't, and either way, they couldn't coach you through a fidelity statement. You were learning the instrument while you were playing it. 2. The skepticism that protected you socially worked against you financially. If you don't trust the financial advisor, you don't hire one. If you don't trust the market, you don't put enough in. If you don't trust your employer, you don't lean into the match. Every one of those instincts was rational in isolation. Stack them across 30 years and you get a $40,000 median. 3. And this is the one nobody likes to say out loud. You were absorbing a load underneath all of this. Aging parents, kids who needed college money, a house that kept needing things, a career that kept restructuring. The money that should have been compounding in an index fund was instead patching the roof, covering mom's prescriptions, and floating a kid through a semester at a state school. You weren't blowing it on nothing. You were spending it on people. Before I keep going, I've been working on something on the side. A book called Psychology of Gen X. It gets into a lot of this. The stuff that got wired into you young and what it's doing to you now. The patterns you can't quite explain about yourself. Links in the description if you want to look. And to everyone watching and sharing this stuff, genuinely, thank you. If you want to go a step further, there's a Patreon too. Subscribers get early access to videos with no ads, and you help keep the channel running. That link's right there as well, QR codes on screen. Okay, back to the fool. There's one more layer to the setup, and it's the one that's actually breaking right now, in real time. Social Security. The current Social Security projections put trust fund depletion around 2033. After that, without congressional action, the program could only pay about 77% of scheduled benefits. 23% haircut. That math hits your cohort right at the worst possible moment, because 2033 is the year the oldest Gen Xers are 68 and the youngest are 53. It lands on you exactly when you're either retiring or staring down the last decade of saving. So picture the full stack. Pensions gone behind you. 401k experiment underperforming. Social Security taking a quarter off the top right when you walk in the door. An economist named Teresa Ghilarducci, who's been studying retirement policy for decades, told CBS News that the whole DIY 401k approach is flimsy. Her word, flimsy. That's a policy expert with a career in this stuff, on national TV, telling you the structure you were handed was never going to hold. And almost half of Gen X, in that same reporting, said it'll take a miracle to retire. This is where the fool psychology gets really specific, so pay attention. When you get handed a flimsy structure and told it's solid, and then the structure starts to wobble, you have two options. You can panic, or you can do what a lot of you have been doing for 30 years, which is quietly absorb it. Just take the hit. Don't make a scene. Don't ask anyone for help. Don't call the advisor. Don't tell your spouse the full number. Don't tell your kids. Don't tell your friends. Just figure out the next move. That instinct, absorb quietly, don't burden anyone, kept a lot of families functioning. It is also exactly the instinct that lets a retirement problem sit in a drawer for 15 years. The same trait that makes you reliable makes you slow to ask for help. The fool walks the cliff alone because asking for directions feels like admitting you're lost. Here's a contrast that tells the whole story. The boomer who didn't save as much got the pension and the housing market and the Social Security check at full freight. The millennial who didn't save as much got auto-enrollment in their 401k starting around 2006. Target date funds defaulted. Financial literacy memes on TikTok. And the long bull run of the 2010s while they were in their 20s. You got none of those guardrails. You got a clipboard. And then, and this is the part the data backs up but nobody says, you got described by everyone above and below you as cynical, as detached, as ironic, as a slacker. Twenge's research shows the institutional skepticism was real and measurable. The popular story turned that skepticism into a personality flaw, when what it actually was an accurate read on what was coming. Here's the ICSC data point that I love, because it does the rest of the work for me. The International Council of Shopping Centers ran a study in October 2025. Gen X is 19% of the US population and drives 31% of all in-store and online spending. You are economically one of the most powerful generations in the country right now, per capita, by a lot. They're literally calling you the generation retailers can't afford to ignore, even as everyone else does. So zoom out. You are simultaneously a top spending cohort in the country, the most worried about retirement of any generation in the Allianz survey, the least prepared by nearly every measure, the most institutionally skeptical when measured, and the one carrying the median $40,000 nest egg into a Social Security cut. That is a portrait of the fool in the old sense, seeing clearly, carrying everything, funding the room, and short on the one thing the room is going to ask for next. Now, the reframe. Because I'm not going to leave you here. That would be cruel and also boring. The fool in the tarot is at the start of a journey, not the end. The card is numbered 0 on purpose. The cliff isn't the end. It's the moment before the step. The math that's broken behind you is not the math that's in front of you. Here is what is still true. Gen X is, on average, in peak earning years right now. Goldman's own research suggests roughly 45% of you are behind on savings, which means a real chunk of you are not. The ones who are on track or close to it did the same setup you did, with the same flimsy 401k under the same conditions. The structure is real, and so is the room to move inside it. There are 3 moves that change the trajectory more than people think. 1. The catch-up contribution. The IRS lets people over 50 put extra money into a 401k and IRA every year, on top of the normal limit. Most people don't use it because they don't know it exists, or they assume they can't afford it. Even partial use of it for a few years materially changes the end number. The compounding window is shorter, yes, but the dollars going in are bigger, and the tax break is right now when you need it. 2. The match, if you've been leaving it on the table. There's no investment on earth that returns what a full employer match returns in year 1. If you're contributing less than what gets you the whole match, that's the first lever before anything else. 3. The advisor conversation you've been avoiding. I know. The skepticism is rational. The industry has earned its reputation. But the fee-only fiduciary version of this, somebody legally required to act in your interest, paid by you, not by commission, is a real thing, and it didn't exist in this form when you were 25. The fool walks alone. The person who makes it to the other side of the cliff usually didn't. The fool isn't the punchline of the story. The fool is the one who saw it clearly the whole time and still has to do the work. That's you. That's been you. The cynicism was accurate. The setup was rigged. The bill is real. And the next move is still yours. You were the experiment. The experiment isn't over. The part of it that's still being written is the part where you decide what to do now that you can see the whole thing. One more piece before we close out, because I want to leave you with something you can actually carry. The fool's real superpower isn't the cynicism. It's the pattern recognition that came with it. You spent 30 years reading bosses, reading markets, reading the small print on the back of the page everyone else signed without flipping over. That skill didn't go anywhere. It's still in you. The reason it didn't show up in your 401k statement is that nobody told you the 401k was the page you were supposed to be reading. Now you know. So read it. Pull the statement up. Look at the contribution percentage. Look at what the match actually is. Look at what the fund is invested in. And notice if you picked it in 1998 and never touched it again. A lot of you are sitting in a money market fund from the Clinton administration because somebody told you conservative was the safe pick, and you never went back. Call it what it is, an unattended room. Walk into it. And then do the thing the fool is best at, which is the unsentimental look. No drama, no shame spiral. Just, what's the number? What's the gap? What's the move? The same energy you bring to a leaking water heater or a kid's tuition bill. You don't cry about the water heater. You figure out who to call. Here's the last piece I want you to hold. The Schroders survey, the Allianz numbers, the NIRS median, the Goldman framing, the Social Security math, every one of those data points is a snapshot. None of them are a forecast for any specific person. The median is a middle. The middle has a top half. The top half is full of people who started late, who got divorced and started over, who lost a job at 52 and rebuilt, who absorbed the parents and the kids and still found a way. They are not smarter than you. They are not luckier than you. They just stopped treating the retirement account like somebody else's problem and started treating it like the room. That's the reframe. No optimism speech, no pep talk. Just, the room is yours now. It always was. The experiment handed you the keys and forgot to mention they were keys. Walk in. Quick thing before I go. Psychology of Gen X came out of doing this channel and realizing all these topics connect into one bigger story about how you got built. So, to everyone who was able to get it, or anyone thinking of getting it, thank you for supporting the channel. Genuinely. If you're looking to get it for yourself, scan the QR code on screen right now. All right, go watch the one on the screen. I think it's the right one for you.